Good morning, everybody. My name is Sam Fleming, and I am one of the co-founders of Earth Blox. As you'll find out very shortly, Earth Blox is essentially a cloud-based platform that provides easy access to satellite data and the tools to build models for analyzing that. And the case study I'm going to talk through is related to the kind of finance sector, in particular case study within kind of the ESG reporting space. So let's see. Where do I need to point this? There we go. So bit of a tagline. So measuring climate and nature risk for assets and facilities worldwide. I'm going to need to remember to point that way. So every 2.5 years, we lose an area of forest the size of the UK. That works out to a football pitch approximately every 2 seconds. So just to wake you up and scare you a little bit there. And really, we're only just starting to see the impact of this. I think if we start to think about some of the catastrophic events that have happened in Europe over the summer, or actually New York this week, and really what this is doing is this is putting 2/3 of our global economy at risk. And because of that, we're starting to see transformational regulations and guidelines and frameworks to help move the economy, move the global economy and organizations and businesses towards reducing both our impact on the climate, but also nature and the environment. One such example of this is the recently adopted EU deforestation regulation, which is essentially going to mandate that six, I think it's 7th off the top of my head, key commodities that either are imported or exported in and out of the EU essentially have to demonstrate that they are deforestation free. And to put that into context, for palm oil is found within 50% of supermarket products. So this is pretty huge. And that's just one regulation. If you think about TCFD, which is about reporting on financed portfolio and the climate impact, which is now mandatory here in the UK as well as many other countries across the world, and the recently updated TNFD, which takes a similar tack but looks more at nature. And that's the kind of basis for the case study that I'm going to kind of talk about today. But really, this is just a drop in the ocean of all the different guidelines and frameworks that are coming out, and it's becoming incredibly complex space to kind of navigate, and ensuring that there's reliable, trustworthy data streams coming in to support this reporting is really important. And so from our perspective, we hear these four things a lot, and I think it's really worth kind of keeping in mind when we're talking about all of this. And so we certainly, during the panel discussion earlier, I think we touched on these quite a lot. So the first is credibility. Within this space of complexity, there are lots of guidelines and regulations, and they're all kind of overlapping, but also not. Sometimes they're very prescriptive, often they're not. Ensuring credibility in your reporting is really, really important. And making sure that the method and the data sets that you're using support that credibility is going to be really important to avoid claims of greenwashing or even worse consequences further down the line. And I guess to support that credibility is transparency. So being able to be open about what data sets you're using, what methods and models you're using to process that data to tell you about your impact on biodiversity is going to be really important. And I guess to support that is ownership. So financial institutions, organizations that are reporting against these frameworks are essentially going to have to take ownership and take responsibility for the approaches taken. But it's not just taking all that into context, and the example I'll talk about today is also about scalability. So I'm going to talk loosely based around some work we've been doing this year with Citibank, looking at essentially looking at their finance portfolio and their impact on biodiversity and nature. For context, they have a financial interest in millions of assets all over the world. So you can look at your impact on biodiversity if it's one particular site where you probably send some ecologists out, but that's not really feasible if you're talking millions of assets spread globally. So, and this is where Earth Blox comes in, and space data in particular. So a little bit about us. We are built by climate scientists. So two of my co-founders are both renowned academics at the University of Edinburgh, as well as others. And so, quite simply, how does Earth Blox work? Well, step one is select your data. Step two is to build your workflows or build your models. Step three is to get the results. So what does this actually look like in practice? So it's bringing together both your data, but also the best available data from around the world, whether that's publicly available data from people like NASA or the European Space Agency, or whether it's commercial data sets buying from the very best of commercial satellite providers, or even your own bespoke data sets, bringing in field data. So those ecologists I mentioned earlier, this data can all feed into Earth Blox, and then feeds into these different models, which we've either been built by our team of experts, or can be custom built alongside you to give you that ownership, but also that transparency. With those results delivered via a number of different ways. So the example I'll talk about today is about delivering results via, it's not sexy, but via API. So really integrating with integrating with existing systems and reporting internal frameworks and systems rather than being something standalone. It's feeding into this complexity and myriad of things going on. So we work across a number of sectors. So we work across supply chains, looking at climate risks. We also work with a number of organizations who are looking at nature-based solutions to help them achieve net zero targets. So ensuring the quality of carbon credits. It's been particular of interest because of some recent articles in The Guardian. So again, space data can help verify this, determine the quality of projects, and help ensure that only the best quality projects are going through and generating carbon credits. And then the example that we will look at today in a bit more detail, looking at biodiversity impact assessments and identifying priority ecosystems. So that's what we're going to look at just now. As I said, this is loosely based around some work we've been doing with Citibank. It's obviously not their actual work. I can't share that with you. But that gives me a little bit of scope to tie it perhaps a little bit more closely to the TNFD framework. Last week before at New York Climate Week, the first version 1.0 of the TNFD guidelines were published and released. So that's a major milestone, and I think we'll see this continuing to evolve. And certainly the expectation is of TNFD initially being a voluntary reporting scheme. It's likely to follow the trajectory of TCFD and become mandatory. So, and as we'll see, biodiversity in nature is significantly more complex to tackle than something like carbon or climate impact. So quite helpfully, though, there is a nice framework for looking at this. But we're going to start at the top. We're going to start at the problem. We have millions of assets spread all around the globe. They sit within an internal data warehouse, whether that's something like Google BigQuery or even just a spreadsheet within your own internal servers. We need to turn this, and you can see the kind of geographic spread, into understanding, well, like what is our finance portfolio and what is the impact on nature and biodiversity? Where do we need to focus our efforts and work with our supply chains and customers to improve this? So the TNFD framework is for the kind of monitoring is called LEAP, so locate, evaluate, assess, prepare. Space data really feeds into the locate and evaluate steps. So the first part is like where are the assets that you have some kind of financial interest in? Crucially, what's the area of operation? So the example we'll look at is palm oil. We know the latitude and longitude of the palm oil mills, like where might they be sourcing their palm oil from, and then what ecosystems are they interfacing with? So with Earth Blox, we can do all of this. So palm oil, highly perishable product, really needs to be processed within 24 hours of harvest, which realistically means you've got a maximum travel time from the mill of about an hour. So this creates a very clear zone of, even if you don't know exactly this is where it's sourcing it from, you know it's within this area. So we can begin to say, well, this mill, its area of operation is within this area. What ecosystems are we interacting with? So this location here is in Indonesia, and so it interfaces with Sumatran lowland rainforest and Sumatran peat swamps. So quite quite important ecosystems for nature and biodiversity. The next steps is looking at, well, within this area, how high priority is this ecosystem? So obviously I've just picked one that is quite high priority, but we saw previously so the example was 2,000 assets, but within customers it could be millions of assets. Knowing which of these are located within priority ecosystems, again, helps them to prioritize both their reporting but also subsequent actions. And so again, space data can help identify and provide information around, well, is this a priority ecosystem? So looking at the intactness or the degradation of biodiversity, looking at, well, okay, it's really important for nature, but like, is this accessible at all? Is it at the top of a mountain that we're literally not going to send trucks up? So it's not at risk. Or is it actually really accessible? It's close to centers of population, and so therefore more likely to be impacted. So all of these data streams can be fed in through a model that is kind of built and bespoke and tweaked for organizations to allow them to adjust to the context, demonstrating that credibility. But once you know where, okay, this location is important for nature, and you know that you have an asset located there that was operating within that area, what is the impact of that? And so here we can see for this particular palm oil mill, we are looking at, this is essentially an impact score. Again, I think there's 10 different data streams feeding in, each handpicked because they tell us something about the type of ecosystems that palm oil in particular might be impacting. And that big red hotspot you can see in the middle is essentially deforestation of either primary or long-term secondary forest cleared for new palm oil plantations. So instantly we can see what this asset is having an impact. But then if we can take it back up to that top of those millions of assets, which of these is having the biggest impact? This location is not the biggest impact from the ones we looked at, but it does tell quite a clear story with that kind of area of expansion and of those kind of plantations. But all of this ultimately then feeds through into that reporting framework. And it's like, where are we having an impact? What's the importance of those ecosystems? And what impact are we having? So kind of rattle through that kind of loose case study there. So just to kind of round it back up to kind of Earth Blox and who are we working with and what are we working with? Because obviously that was just one example. So we work with large emitters, so helping them to work towards their net zero targets. The quickest way to do this is through carbon offsets. Also channels funding and finance through to conservation efforts that just wouldn't happen otherwise. I know carbon offsets are quite contentious, but honestly, you'll never convince me that they are not a good thing in the short term. They cannot be used as that's not the end of the line, but it's where you get to get started on this. As we've seen just then, working with global financial institutions to assess impact on nature and the impact for millions of facilities all around the world. But we also work with insurers, so helping provide them information on climate, environmental risk, and how that's evolving over time. And like, if you insure an asset here, is that going to be bigger risk in the future? Just because it's not been flooded today or previously doesn't mean it won't be in the future. We have a global spread of customers, all of these looking at climate and nature in some form or other. And not too much of a sales pitch, but these are some of the things that they're saying. So this would be able to kind of grow their activities without increasing their headcount, so more efficiency by using space data. And that means they're able to track millions of assets anywhere in the world. Analysis time is cut from 80 days. So my background is consultancy, basically doing satellite mapping projects on behalf of other people. I now do things in demos that take me seconds that would literally take a week. It would have taken me a week worth of work, and someone would have paid me a lot of money to do. So really kind of harnessing the power of technology and cloud computing to make this a reality. But ultimately, what we're trying to do with Earth Blox is give our customers, our users, the full control over how this is happening and what's happening. We're not about building a black box solution with get my magic wand out and I've got an AI model that will do it for you, and no, I'm not going to tell you how it works. That's really not what we're about at all, because it comes back to that credibility, transparency, and ownership pieces. You can't hide behind all of that, particularly in such an ever-evolving market. And and the need to demonstrate that actually what you're reporting on has some basis, in fact. So thank you very much, and welcome any questions that might come my way.
Thank you very much, Sam. Do we have any questions for Sam?
Hi, thanks. That's really interesting what you're doing. When you said you couldn't share what you're doing with Citibank, I think this morning we had the discussion about, collaboration is key. So from a research perspective, so I'm a professor from University of Birmingham, we're looking to try and set up a centre of excellence around looking at ESG in all aspects, and we've been approached by companies about this space aspect and what it can add to that. Do you get access to all data? Because I know one of the complaints of some companies is they have to buy data. So did you have that problem? And if you did, how did you overcome it? And also, just giving you a proposition, how do you think you can get people like Citibank to share it with the smaller fintechs so that we get more of this shared information, so that that's a good thing rather than just protecting your competitive advantage?
Yeah, so I guess the reason I can't share is because it's their customer data, and they can't share their customer data. I guess what we were trying to do in that example, and I think more broadly across our customer base, is starting with what is it you're trying to achieve? What outcomes are you looking for? Because that then tells you, okay, well, these data sets are probably going to be best to answer that. In many cases, you might say, okay, well, this data you don't pay any extra for because it's produced by NASA, and okay, it's really difficult to access, but with the platform we make it nice and easy for you. Or actually, is the level of accuracy or just the nuance of what you want to do with it mean you do have to purchase data? We do purchase data on behalf of our customers and make that available. Sometimes our customers will purchase their own data or via us purchase data, and it really comes back to what outcomes are they looking for, and that's part of the advice that we try and provide is around making sure that it's both the right data and the right approach. And often we're working with data science teams who are much more familiar working with spreadsheets and numbers and financials, and the idea of getting essentially nice pictures from space that is going to tell them something, and how do you then integrate that data in is that's kind of where we see part of our role. So I hope you feel that answers your question.
So we've got time for one more question.
Yeah, this gentleman here. Yeah,
the far side.
Thank you so much. So I just want to address a point regarding getting the onboarding data from these highly protected institutions. So there's an organization that's called Smart Data Foundry. So what they do have is a strong data protection and governance team in the organization that works with the bank, which is NatWest. And what they do is they remove personal identifiable information when they do public presentations or any kind of data transfer from the bank to their organization. So it's more like an academically institutionalized section of the University of Edinburgh. So going back to my question, I wanted to know how frequently you make updates to your clients. I've noticed that you said you reduce analysis from 80 days to 8 minutes. However, I do understand that with satellite data, it's not always a smooth ride. Sometimes you have interruptions in service provision, and sometimes your data source may not be as consistent with what promise you made to your clients. So I just wanted to know if you make quarterly updates for your clients, or do you make monthly updates to your clients to help them address reforestation concerns?
So the really politician type answer to that is that it depends on what our customers are looking for. So if they are looking, so some customers we do this quarterly. I think within the context of biodiversity and nature, quarterly works quite well. Unless there's a catastrophic event, you're not really going to see lasting and meaningful impact on nature at a finer resolution. Monthly, there's maybe some argument for. But if they're looking for daily, then that just influences what type of data that is used as part of that. But if it's annually, then we can use different data sets. And so really it's not about us telling our customers, yeah, this is how you do it. It's about that collaboration and working with them to say, well, like, what outcomes do you need? Do you need to be reporting on this weekly, monthly, quarterly? Like, what is your reporting cadence on this? Okay, you're reporting on it annually, but what you want to do is you want to be able to demonstrate how that's evolved over the year because you've worked with them and they've taken on some best management plans that are and brought on some certifications. So can you demonstrate that that's had the positive impact? And that's where you kind of work with them to find out, okay, well, this is a cadence, this is a resolution, this is the type of data we need, and then that helps the decisions on what data and what methods and models. And that comes back to being credible. It's like, if this is what you're doing, this is how they're approaching it. So yeah, there's not one way or the other. We essentially have almost live feeds from satellite data. NASA satellites pass over every day, so every day the data is updated. So you can see the centre of Glasgow yesterday if it wasn't cloudy, or if it is cloudy, choose a different satellite that isn't impacted by clouds. So yeah.
Thanks very much, Sam. Are you hanging around for lunch?
I am hanging around for
Yep,
lunch.
good.
Yes.
So probably happy to take a few more questions later on. Thank you very much.